Oh, okie dokie. Just organizing myself. Got a little funny thing on my laptop here. Okay. Okie dokie. Good morning, everybody, or evening or afternoon. Hey, Paula, how are you? Sorry, about 5 minutes late. Sorry. Had to go make my coffee. Wait, let me just grab my coffee here. Yeah, I know, coffee. I'm on a routine. I'm just going to turn my little heaty off here. I'm trying to get really organized. I've got, when you just get so busy, you got so much to do, and I'm not very organized. So I woke up earlier this morning. I'm getting in a routine because I'm studying. I did some study this morning, then I did this and that, and yeah. So, oh no, I've made a smoothie, so I can't burn that. Oh dear. How are you, Paula? How's your girl? I really love talking when sucking and crib biting, so we're going to talk about that today. Hello, Faris. Hello, how are you? Thank you for joining us. So if you have any questions, I'm going to answer Paula's question. But if you pop on and you have a question, much better on Graze Easy. Yeah. I'm gonna do a webinar with Jenny. So that's really good. I'll let her know. I was actually going to call her. I sent her an email, but I was going to call her today. We're both not the most tech savvy people, so learning all this, doing a Zoom session will be interesting. But we're going to get a Zoom session together, and we're going to talk about all the pasture and grasses, because what was it last? It was my last 2 lives that I discussed the problems with pasture and grasses. And oh wow, look, my story, and guess what? So Paula, I made it onto the Gutsbuster page with my grey horse off the grass. Yeah. So this is my. Wow, what a difference. So what's in Graze Easy? So I'm going to talk about I've got my little notey thing here. Graze Easy, because I'm on Conky's Own at the moment, but I've got them off the grass as much as possible with what we can do. So they've eaten the paddock down so much. I've just got them in the home paddock. And Tommy, I've just started to see, I think my poor big chestnut horse, he has been in pain. He's been feeling terrible. And I just saw a little bit of a spark, a glow back in his eye yesterday. So I've had them on the supplements probably about 3 weeks, but it's been really hard to get them off the pasture, especially when you've got 20 horses, 19. I have a space for one other horse. But it's been really hard, but I stocked up and went and bought yesterday. That's why I did my live today, because I had to go and buy Rhodes hay yesterday. And higher mag than Cal, but has both. Okay, yeah. I'll talk to Jenny about it, but because I've got them on Conky's Own, I've got them on the Cal Extra because of the big head that I've got the problem with. But yeah, they've just pasture green grass is just not good for horses. If it's generally not good for horses, but then when you've got the problem with these types of certain grasses that cause even more of a problem, it's been such a big learning curve for me. I'm so glad to hear that they're so much better. In what way, Paula? Have they settled down, or? How have they improved? Yes, behavior. It's amazing how grass can make such scatty. I find hyper reactive, like really sort of spooky behavior. Depending, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fructans, the sugars in it. Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the sugars. And then coming into spring and sort of your autumns, you've got the mycotoxin problems as well. But it's so very complex. Jenny's going to be really good. We'll do a webinar. In fact, I'll follow her up today on that because I sent her an email, but I would like to know tips on slowing down horse in trot and also, hi Faris, slowing down a horse in trot and also canter other than circles. Okay, the best way to engage the hind end. Okay, so I'll answer this one for you first, and then we'll go into your, Paula, about the wind sucking. Hope you can. Lulu! So slowing down the horse in trot and canter other than circles. So, Faris, if you can just tell me a little bit about it's an off the track thoroughbred that you have, and is this under saddle? I presume this is riding under saddle. That she is it a gelding or a mare rushing? So what are they doing? Are they rushing under saddle? Lulu, here. Sorry, I always have dogs in my lives. Lulu, here. Lulu, here. Lulu, here. And I don't know if my yes, off the track. Yeah. How long have they been off the track for? I'll just get my dog. Lulu, here. Inside. Have I got everybody inside? Yeah, just got my dog back inside because she's a bit noisy. So when it comes to slowing down the horse in trot and canter, you start off, it's off the tracks that they quite often can be very, very rushy. In fact, it's my first off the track thoroughbred was a very rushy horse. And he had this really fast, sort of tense anxiety trot. Long time he's better now with slowing down, but he was always extra in the beginning. Oh, okay, long time. Okay. So what you want to do is, first of all, when it comes to the training side of it, we start off, so with off the tracks, to be able to slow them down, you need to be able to teach them pressure and release. So we're always starting off best with in-hand work. So starting off on the ground and teaching them to slow their legs, just in your head collar and your lead rope. So I've got a couple of videos up on my YouTube channel where I'm just working with Tommy. I've also got my last, and it'll probably be good for you. So this is your mare too, Paula, isn't it? Rushy horses. So if they're rushing under saddle, they're probably not going to be very clear in their stop and go in hand. So Faris, have you done any in hand work, like slowing them down and speeding them up? Just in your walk, first you start off with halt, stop, and walk. And even though it doesn't seem related, when they're rushing under saddle, that means there's a deficit in he's good on the ground. Okay, so if you can just go and just double check that. So make sure that in hand, when you ask him to walk and trot, so you want them to be very fluid. So being able to lengthen his trot and then bring him back. So if you just trot next to him, walk and trot, leading, and then you want him to be sort of going from a nice active trot to be able to pressure rein, like lead rein pressure back, and then be able to slow his legs down and just see if he slows down really quickly, or does he get heavy and lean into the head collar. So that's just going to give you an idea of if he's clear. So he needs to be able to understand what you're asking first of all. So this is going to give us an idea of whether he does really understand what the slowing aids mean. And quite often, is he quite a tense horse? Like when you put your leg on him, does he get a little bit worried about your leg, or is he a little bit dull to your leg? So sometimes they can rush, but they can rush under saddle because they're hypersensitive to the leg. He's dull. Okay, that's interesting. So already we know that he's not clear in his in his learned responses. So he's an interesting one. And Paula, you might find that this might be the same with your mare when you get under saddle. They can be rushy, but they can be dull to the legs. So rushing, so going fast does relate to your stop and going slow as well. So to be able to slow the legs down, you need to have a clear stop response. So that's with your rein aid. Okay, so you want to be able to teach your horse to slow down by the first in. Yeah, your girl's very sensitive. Yeah, and you'll probably find that when you get on her, she might be sensitive to the leg. And that's interesting because we'll go into the wind-sucking one as well, because sensitive horses tend to be windsuckers or crib biters. But there's rushing horses, there's a combination of two. There's ones that if you put your leg on, it's like they feel like they've got electric. My first off the track thoroughbred was like that. Like I had to really habituate him. Well, I didn't actually, because I didn't know what I was doing back then. I didn't know any of this back then, but had him now. And then with other horses like this, you need to be able to habituate them and teach them to relax to the leg contact. But Faris, if you're boy is very dull to the leg, you need to go back, guys, and retrain what's called your basic responses. So being able to control his legs. So your basic responses, I always start off in hand, and I've got some videos working with Tommy. I've got Nina coming up too. As well, but just making sure, check in hand, that if you can rush forward in the trot, so trot him off and then see if he slows down and he doesn't lean or get heavy. So when you're riding him, is he heavy in the bridle, Faris? Does he lean into the bit? Is he heavy, or does he sort of carry himself with his head up, or is he in good self-carriage? Because these are all signs of whether he's clear in his aids of stop and go. But he definitely sounds like he's dull in his go. So when you give him a little nudge with your lower leg, he doesn't immediately go up and trot. Okay, so, and then the rushing, okay, so you want him, rushing is, it depends. You go back and train all your basic responses. So this is your stop, which is slowing the legs down, and your go, which is if you give him a little nudge, you want him to bounce up into the trot nice and active, so that they're like under stimulus control. You feel like that they're very fluid and flowing. No off the track thoroughbred will ever feel like that when you get them, ever. And it takes quite a long while to get that, because they carry their body on the forehand for a start. In racing, they're bred to gallop. They use their body in a more horizontal, where they're going at speed. So this is going to take a while, and I'd say that especially in Canter, Faris, your boy's probably rushing because he's not in balance, and he more than likely doesn't have the strength over the top line. Does he have a really good top line? Is he? So I'd say the rushing could be because he's not in balance and he's struggling to balance himself, and he hasn't got the strength, okay, to be able to carry himself in self-carriage, and his rushing is a symptom of him trying to balance himself. That's my sense of what could be happening. So what you need to do there is to teach him self-carriage, to be able to teach him to gradually strengthen his hind end. He's developing it now, yeah. So you want to be able to, his rushing could be, especially with the canter, he's rushing because he can't balance himself. So all about being in self-carriage, working over the top line, but I wouldn't be cantering him at all. For an example, with the training series that I have coming out with Ty, I don't think I've got any Ty. I've got a couple of videos on my YouTube of showing Ty. So if you don't know if you've had a look at them, Faris, of retraining and off the track thoroughbred with Ty, I think I've got a few on the bit ones. I did not start cantering him for 8 months. Okay, he was in a full retraining program. He had quite a few issues. He had a very intense racing career. He was then spelled for 12 months, and his top line was terrible. He had nothing. He was so atrophied over his top line, and there was no way, I could feel that there was no way that he was going to be able to hold himself in self-carriage. So it was a very progressive, nearly a year, but 8 full-on months. I think I probably would have spent at least 2 months in my groundwork in my in-hand work before I even got in the saddle. And then when I got in the saddle, I did a lot of little walks, so transitions. So transitions from your walk to your trot. So teaching him to be very adjustable. Okay, so if he's dull to the leg, you want to teach him to be a lot more forward from his leg aid. So a little nudge. If he doesn't respond, a firmer nudge with your lower leg until he responds, and then you stop. So you want to get him light to his leg aid. Okay, so if he's dull, the first thing you want to do is work on his forward. And then when he's forward, I'd say he's rushing because he's probably on the forehand as well. And being on the forehand is a symptom of not being forward. They can sort of rush and feel heavy and downhill. So what you want to do, if they're rushing and feeling a bit heavy and downhill, heavy in the rein, you need to slow them down. And this starts off with in-hand work. Slow them down with your reins if you're in the saddle. And you want to feel like that when they slow down, that they slow down with their hind legs, and that you'll feel the weight shift back to their hind legs. It's hard to explain, but when you ask him to slow down, you want to feel like he slows down where he shifts his weight to his hind legs. Okay, and then as soon as he does that, you release. Does that make sense, Faris? So that, just say he's rushing, I wouldn't even think about canter at the moment, because his canter is rushing in canter because he hasn't got his balance and strength in the trot. And I don't canter until I feel like that when I canter, it's going to be easy for them. You get that feeling. So in your trot, you want to be able to get him more active to your legs. So even though he's rushing, I'd say he's rushing because he feels like he's pulling himself along with the front legs. He's leaning. Let me know if I'm wrong. And he's not engaging his hind end. So what you want to do is get him forward from your lower leg. And then when you ask forward, you want to feel like with your seat under the saddle that he's stepping under with his hind legs. And you will find that when he's more active behind, and then you can then practice your stop and go. Just say 8-10 strides. That's okay. If he's not heavy in the hand, that's okay. He's still, do you feel like he's really stepping under and active with his hind legs? He could be just, he doesn't have to be heavy in the hand. Okay. But what you want to feel like is that he's, so that's what you want to keep practicing. If he's round, it's not even so much being round. The roundness comes from the activity of his hind legs. Okay, as he steps under with his hind legs, the muscles work up over the top, over under the saddle and into the bridle. So if you say, like, does his round mean that you feel like his hind legs are active? So if he's rushing and he's round, I would be practicing your stop by transitions by going from trot back to walk. But when you bring him back to walk, you want to feel like that he stops with his hind legs coming underneath him. Not a slam dank trot to halt, but just your trot to walk. Ask with light rein pressure first. If he doesn't respond, firmer rein pressure. But as soon as he slows his legs down, the important thing is to release. So to stop his rushing, first of all, you want to make sure that he's active in the first place and that he's not doing these short, choppy, rushy little strides, that he's moving off your lower leg, and that when he moves off your lower leg, that he's pushing from his hind end. When you feel that propulsion from his hind leg up into a trot, even if it's a little bit fast, then use your rein aid to slow him down, but feel like his legs are slowing down, his hind legs are slowing down. And so that's what you call a half halt. And you'll find that once he gets lighter to your lower leg pushing him forward, and then even if you feel like it's a bit rushy, that's okay, as long as you feel like he's pushing from his hind end. Don't be afraid to be faster. Half halt, both reins, right? Yeah, both reins. Yep. But don't be afraid to have him go a little bit fast. I don't know if this is your situation, but with my first off the track thoroughbred, he was really rushy, like really stressed, like this tight, really rushy. Like I felt like I had this choppy tense trot. And because I was doing dressage comps and that, I look back now, what I would do with him is push him forward, but push him forward. So, because he was sensitive to my legs, but he wasn't using his hind end. So I would have, instead of being nervous because he was so tense and short and choppy in his strides, I held him even more. Okay. And, that made everything worse. So what I should have done is actually get him to be very adjustable with my lower legs. So I think, Faris, what would help you is to get your boy really listening to your lower leg. Like, give him a little kick and feel him forward, even if it feels rushy. But as long as you feel like he's propelling from his hind end, and then 4 or 5, 6 big strides, then slow him down, but feel like he comes back on his butt. And then ask him to slow his legs, slow his trot, and then forward again. But you want to feel like there's activity and there's bouncing. Don't be afraid to do like extended trots. Don't be afraid for it to be fast, but fast in a correct way, not fast and short and choppy where you're trying to contain him, but fast that he's really stepping underneath himself, and then ask him to slow. Does that make sense? So don't be afraid to go fast, but have him teach him to be adjustable so that then he comes back. So transitions, like your half halts, both reins, but you want to feel his legs slow down. And as soon as his legs slow down, you release, because the only way he knows that he's done the right thing is the release of the pressure. And that's also teaching him self-carriage. You're strengthening him because he's not, I know for me, for instance, I held my little rushy one, held him together all the time. I held him together because I was worried that it was going to be rushy and horrible, that to get his strides bigger at first, then absolutely get his strides bigger. But when you get his strides bigger, make sure that you feel like that his hind legs are going bigger, not just his front legs. So feel that the step underneath of his hind legs. Then when his strides are bigger, then slow him down. And then you can ask for bigger again and then slow him down. But make sure he doesn't get, I don't know if he's a very relaxed horse, but make sure that he doesn't get stressed or hot. The Thai videos I have yes, self-carriage. Well, that's what self-carriage is having him. So Thai, for instance, where you feel that if you see the before and after, I've got a video there. I shared it are you in my Facebook group, Faris? I shared recently the before and after. It's one of the Thai ones. So when I started with Thai, he was heavy on the forehand. He was very dull. Oh, yeah. Look, if you go into one of my videos, when I finish this, if you go into one of my videos, you'll have to forgive me. I'm not the most tech savvy person, so this is all a big learning curve for me. But if you go on my Facebook group, ask to join that. One, you'll get on my email list so that I can send you all, if you want to. You don't have to, but if you want to, you're more than welcome to join my email list. And then in the Facebook group, I put lots of posts up and retrainings, but I just recently posted one of the videos where you see a before and after with Thai, and I've got a full retraining series with Thai. So I videoed every single video with Thai from my first day in training all the way to when I've got him up cantering when he goes. Yes, and hey, how are you, Sarah Becker? Yes, my training program. I've got my Thai retraining series coming up. And I'm changing the format. So we're going to do, I'm putting it as we speak. I've been changing the platform over to it. And we're going to do a live weekly training series. I've got about 6 people ready to go. Hey, Natalie, how are you? Just talking about, I've got everyone on here today. Yay. Just talking about the Thai retraining series. So I'm just changing. I'm going to do the videos because there's so much content in it. I get a bit overwhelmed with it. So what I think I might do is get a group of us together. And then it's what they call a beta launch. Okay, so everyone that's already in my academy already has access to that. But a beta launch is I've already got 3 or 4 lessons first, which just teaches you how horses learn and that. Then when I go into the Thai retraining, there's so much content and like even training the walk in hand and everything. So I think what I might do is just work with all of us live and we can build the course as we go. And then you guys can tell me if that makes sense. If you're all up for that, if we can just sort of work with it, it'll happen in the group, in the community section. I'll release videos. I really want to make sure everyone's done the, yeah, it'll be really good. It's just I keep looking at all the content and I get a bit overwhelmed with it. So I thought what might be best to do is to make it as we go. Once I've got, I've already got the, how the horses learn. And I think some of you already watched that. And then I've got the training scale. The training scale is in the Kickstart Roadmap course, but I've also put it in this lesson as well. So we need to follow the training scale just so you know what I'm doing. But it's such a lot of content. So I think once we get into the practical things where you can practice it with your horses, we'll do it live and I'll work it with you guys, but whether I release a lesson each week or a lesson each fortnight, and then I'll release the lesson at the beginning of the week, and then we can do a Q&A and a lecture at the end of that week, a couple of sessions each week, and they'll be recorded. So we'll work out the time, but I think that's the best way to go about it. And it'll all be recorded. So what day is it? Friday. So I'm going to put up, I think everyone's on my email list anyway, but I'll put it up in the group, but we'll make sure you've all done the Kickstart Roadmap. That's really important. And Faris, yeah, I've got a whole retraining series with Ty coming up. So from day one, but I've also got a lot more. I've got so many videos. I mean, it's just so much content. It just takes me ages to sort of get it out there because I'm just slow at it. I really am. It takes me ages. Just to even edit one video takes me 6 hours sometimes. It's not changing things. It's just putting in your little comments and all of that. Like I like to do my little comments, but anyway, yeah. So Faris, going back to you, I hope that makes sense, that you're wanting to feel like the hind legs are pushing forward and you're not holding him in front. So when you're pushing forward, allow him to stretch his head, then slow down. So it is very overwhelming. It's really overwhelming, and that's why I want to try and keep it very simple for you guys, because I'm actually doing the diploma of equitation science, and I just it's overwhelming, even though I understand it. Like this book, this is one of my things, and I've just read 4 chapters. I finished it last night. I'm a slow student, but even it's just so much to it. So what I really want to do is break it down so that it is simple and step by step, because I have to reread things over and over and over again. And it all comes back to, in here we go into the whole equitation science. You're all going into the biomechanics of the horse's legs as well, because when we look at training our horses, basically what we're doing is we're teaching them, we're having them under stimulus control. So we're teaching them to be responsive to us. We need to be able to control the speed and the rhythm and the tempo of their legs and their body, their posture as well. But the legs come first. And it's training an animal. It's horse training. But even though it sounds sort of objective and not this whole relationship thing with all of that, it's hard because it's equitation science. It can sound very sciencey, but we need to realize that when we make everything so very clear to our horses and they understand what is being asked of them, it's like we are learning their language and teaching a language between them. We need to make sure that our horse understands exactly everything that we ask of them. And in turn, that creates a lot of calmness and relaxations in the horse. Me just working even with Nina, we've had terrible weather here, like massive flooding. So I haven't been able to do a lot with Nina. But what I've been doing is bringing her in, like practicing his stop and go. And even with Nina, who's a chronic windsucker, who I think we saw with the first video exploding, she's calmed down already. just all I've been doing is stop and go. That's it. So as hard as it does, it creates calmness, being them understanding their training and understanding exactly what's expected of them. The horse understanding what to do and how to get rid of the pressure. Like if we just put a bit of lead rein pressure, they understand how to get rid of it. Then we leave them be. We leave them in self-carriage. We're not nagging them. So stress happens with horses when you've got riders that are continually nagging with their legs or continually have weight on their mouth, because the horse never gets any release of pressure. Horses are very sensitive animals. So we need to realize that becoming very, very clear in our training with them is one of the most important things to do to ensure equine welfare and to ensure that your horse is happy. So I get a bit frustrated with some of the other training methods out there that say before you do anything with your horse, you need to develop a relationship with. Well, you need to develop a relationship, but training and also the whole bonding thing of positive reinforcement is developing a relationship, understanding how your horse learns and understanding how to move and be around your horse and how to clearly communicate with them is developing a relationship with your horse. Clear communication, whether it's human, with our dogs or our horses, is the basis of a very healthy relationship. So horse training is developing clear communication with our horse. And then you've got the relationship side of it. Well, that's right. The training is your relationship side, but then incorporating like your wither scratching, your positive reinforcement. I love anything to do with tactile. I'm not much of a food reward with horses, but more teaching them to enjoy the wither scratching, because that is one of their hardwired behaviors. They groom each other. They're very social animals. So doing that, clear communication through your training, and then positive reinforcement with tactile or food if that works for you, and your horse being able to relax and feel safe and not anxious when you're around. And that's going to be because they understand what you're asking of them and they understand what to expect from you. They're not left in, oh, what's this person going to do now? They're not left in, they need to be able to control their environment. And for a horse to be able to control their environment, they need to be able to understand what to expect and what to do to get rid of any aversive stimuli. So I hope that makes sense. So going to, so Faris, let me know if that makes sense, and please hop into the group as soon as I see your request. I'll go in sometime today. And awesome. Yeah, so videos are really good to be able to explain this, especially with rushy horses, because it's a bit tricky. When you've got a really dull horse, you just need to push them forward, but when you've got a rushy horse, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So you need to be able to not be afraid to let them go forward, but as long as you feel like they're going forward with that strong activity from behind. So yeah, which is basically moving off your leg correctly. And then, pop in the group and you can ask any questions anytime, and also share your photo of your horse, so your OTTB and all of that. So going back, so we've got the training program coming up in the academy, and I'll go now. So I'll move on to your question, Paula, with the wind sucking. So first of all, keep an eye out. Now, what I'm going to do, so in the academy, keep an eye out for an email from me. So make sure, well, if you're already a member, bought the Kickstart Roadmap, if you already bought the Kickstart Roadmap course, either monthly or a full payment, you're on my email list already, but always check your spam. I'll let everybody know I've sent an email, but sometimes it ends up in the spam folders. I don't know why, but oh yes, my website's just been undergoing new changes. So my website will be back up. You may not be working at the moment because I'm redoing it. I hopefully will have that finished at the end of today. And I'll put a link to my website as well. So that's that one. And what else was I going to say? there was something else I was going to say. So keep an eye out from emails from me, because I don't know, not everyone gets the notifications for the posts in the group. Yeah, my website is, I've just changed platforms. So I have my lovely, she's wonderful, she's my graphic designer, just working with me. I'll follow her up on that, but it should be back up within the next 2 to 3 days at the most. I'll try and I'll follow her up today. Yeah, just between the online courses and the website and everything, I have to get more organized. So sorry, everything's a bit slow sometimes. There's just so much information, it gets so overwhelming. But I'll be much better when I get more into a routine. I've been a bit sick the last few weeks as well, and the horses have been sick, and so wind sucking. So I'm going to read your question out, Paula, if I can find it. Yeah. Oh. Cool. Wind sucking. So I've got 4 wind suckers in my herd. Wind sucking is interesting. Working in racing for over 17 years, I've seen many a horse wind suck. And it's quite sad, really. So let's talk about wind sucking, because I know a lot of us have wind sucking crib biting off the track thoroughbreds. So I'll just read your question out, Paula. I've got a hiccup. Wind sucking. One of my girls wind sucks, and I've been studying her habit for a while now. I figured out that it's quite a complex coping mechanism, yeah, and there's a lot more to it than just sucking in air. So she doesn't wind suck constantly, but will do it briefly after stressful situations, like a bad night of weather, or after a good dose of TLC. That's interesting that she does it after some TLC. For example, I can groom her, give her a nice warm meal, warm rug, lots of hay for the evening, and she will be so relaxed and content, almost asleep. Then suddenly a head will pop up and she'll go over to her favourite pole and wind suck half a dozen times. It's almost like she thinks, oh, hang on, what's that nice feeling after human interaction? Let me check in with myself. Sometimes she will go to a log on the ground, chomp clamp several times without sucking before moving on. I've read that horses hold a lot of stress in their jaw. Yeah, well, the whole mouth thing, then that comes in with the whole bit thing, doesn't it? But yeah, their mouth and their everything, they're very, well, I mean, they eat with their mouth. They groom each other with their mouth. We've got our hands, but their horses have their mouth. So you can see how sensitive and like our hands, the horse will be very mouthy. So for instance, with humans that get anxiety, you'll see that a human might, or people that crack their knuckles. Look at that. So someone that cracks their knuckles, or a lot of, quite often when a human will get stressed, they'll start to show, do something with their hands. So it's a little bit similar. She yawns a lot too after TLC. Yeah, that's a good thing, the yawning, though. A bit of releasing. So it sounds like I can't remember, you've told me, but did she have an extensive race career? Paula, how long did she race for? Was it so they do hold a lot of stress in their jaw, and they can be very expressive with their mouth. Well, they do. They're very expressive with their mouth. So like we're expressive with our hands, you can imagine that the horse is their facial, they talk through body language, and they will express themselves through mouth behaviors, especially with stress. Would love to hear your thoughts and experience on wind sucking, to collar or not to collar. I'm on the not collar side with my girl because it's not constant or affecting weight, health, etc. I had a wind sucker many years ago that I thought I had to collar, not knowing any better back then. Yeah, so did I. But I changed his personality, became shut down and defeated. Yeah, I don't. Okay, so I'm not a collar person either. I don't put wind-sucking collars on. I actually hate seeing them. Okay, so she hated it, very stressed, yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting because one of my Nina, she's a windsucker, very, very stressy mare. And she never got to the races. She didn't even get a start. She was in a good stable. Nice people. I don't know. I don't know if they gave a lot of roughage in that, but she obviously found she had a jump out and she was very slow. She obviously found racing stressful because she started windsucking, and also too she didn't perform. So she only had a very brief race career, but she is obviously a bit of a handful and also a windsucker. And I would say probably has gastric ulcers. So with my thoughts on windsucking, so first of all, I've seen a lot of windsucking and crib biting. So crib biting is, I think most of us know that they'll actually grab their front teeth, put their head horizontal and grab their front teeth onto something and suck in a gulp of air. Windsucking, I actually haven't seen many windsuckers. I always usually see them crib bite, but they will just sort of open their mouth and stick their neck and head out and suck in a gulp of air. So I've looked into the windsucking quite a bit because I've got 4 windsuckers in my herd myself. Now, the first thing too is I've noticed I've only had 2 of my 4 windsuckers scoped for gastric ulcers, and they both had gastric ulceration. So that's the thing. If you've got a windsucker, so Paula, have you had your girl scoped for ulcers? Because I think nearly more than not that horses that windsuck will have gastric ulceration. The windsucking doesn't cause the gastric ulceration, but the windsucking, they say, I've written some notes down here actually, just so I don't get all over the place. Because windsucking is a very common problem, and it's a symptom. So for instance, my notes here. So you don't see windsucking in wild horses. Okay, so that's telling us something. So wild horses, you'll never see them windsucking. So that's just showing you that they're windsucking in relation to being domesticated and what we do with them in a domestic situation. So windsucking has been, so crib biting and your windsucking is picked up as a coping mechanism. So they've started it, and usually most of the windsuckers will be performance horses, horses that are stabled, race horses, from the side, never from the front. She has had tie-back surgery. Oh, she had tie-back surgery. Okay. Yes, she has had ulcers. They come and go. So what are you treating her for? Are you, so did you have her on omeprazole? What grade were they? Were they bad or? So she's had tie-back surgery. So you just go into, I've ridden a couple of horses with tie-back surgery. It very rarely works, but it's so stressful for them. Like in track work, a horse that has a breathing issue, it is so stressful for them when they're out there and they're made to gallop and they can't get in air. I really hate riding horses that usually when they've had tie-back surgery, they're still struggling to get the air in. They can't breathe properly. They also get they're very prone to infections and that, but particularly when they're they're having to bring in so much oxygen and breathe out. I've never enjoyed riding horses after tie-back surgery, and they never seem to improve. And it's very, very stressful for them in track work. So I would absolutely, as we know, she was very stressed from a racing career. She's even gone through the tie-back surgery. So her experience of racing and everything has been a very negative one, and she's experienced pain and stress. And would, obviously, if she's had ulcers, she's also had ulcers as well. So I find that my other 2 I haven't had scoped yet, but they say, so windsucking is a coping mechanism. Now, what it does, so the coping with gastric ulceration, stabled life, the stress of stabled life, isolation, high grain diets, which are causing gastric irritation. Tieback surgery is when they so Sarah Becker, when part of the having a mental blank, the your phalanx, is that the phalanx part? I can't remember what they're called, the little flaps. So you've got, as they breathe down, they've got two little flaps, I can't remember what they call, that open and close to allow air and oxygen to come through. And also it blocks off so that no food goes down into the lungs. So what happens with some horses, particularly race horses, one of those little flaps is paralyzed. It doesn't open. So that when they breathe, they have this what they call thick-winded. You'll hear this really thick roaring noise. They call roarers, and it's graded with how badly that little flap is paralyzed. 1, 2, 3, or they might be grade 3 roarer, which is high. So what they'll do with race horses, if they're a roarer, they'll have what they call tie-back surgery. So they'll tie back, they'll suture that flap back. But then what happens is then it doesn't protect, so food can go down into the lungs and things like that. But it's tied back so it doesn't restrict their breathing capacity. I've never ridden a racehorse where it works. I've never ridden a racehorse that's been successful after tie-back surgery. And so a little grey horse, I really worry about where he is now. Oh, he was so beautiful. He was only a 3-year-old, I think, and he had tie-back surgery, and geez, he struggled in his work afterwards. I never rode him beforehand, but he was still very thick in his wind after his surgery, and quite often it fails anyway. The sutures come undone. So that's what tie-back surgery is, Sarah Becker. So with your wind sucking, so it's a coping mechanism. They've picked it up because of stress. And then what it does, so apparently this is from studies, it releases, so when they suck back, it's a bit like addiction. It releases the feel-good hormones. It's dopamine. What's the other hormone? Let me see if I can find it. So it gives them a little bit of a high. Turn it on. Dopamine and, oh, wait, I've just gone. Where did I write it? Anyway, it releases the feel-good hormones. So when they do it, they get a bit of a high from it. So it increases the dopamine receptors, narcotic and dopamine receptors. So when they do it, serotonin, yes. So it's increasing. It is an addiction. So my 4 guys have all windsuckers. It's interesting because I've observed them. 2 of them, for some reason, I don't know why, when they were on particular pasture's a nightmare to me now, but when they were up in Murrum Bateman, they hardly ever windsucked. They were just there by themselves, just the 2 of them when I was moving, and their windsucking really reduced. I don't know why that was. So I'm on a little bit of a journey with them to see what I can do. I haven't put my 2 horses that are not yet. It's not that I'm not going to, but my 2 horses that have scoped, the 2 windsuckers that have scoped with ulcers, I haven't put them on omeprazole yet because I'm trialing a natural therapy. And then if it doesn't work, they'll go to the omeprazole. But omeprazole is not very successful. It will heal them initially, but it has negative consequences, and quite often they'll come back. So the windsucking, going back to the windsucking. Oh, did they? Yeah, pasture's a nightmare. Oh, did they? I'll have a look. Maybe if you share the link, Sarah Becker, I'll have a look. So much to do with pasture. So the windsucking, so I'm losing my train of thought here. The windsucking releases your feel-good hormones. So that's why it becomes addictive. It's basically an addiction. So even though we've got them out of racing, we've treated them for ulcers, so you want to make sure that they're ulcer free, and all your 3Fs, like your friends, your forage, and your freedom, making sure that they're what they need. They've got social, other horses, some other equine companions, that they've got your ad lib forage that you do, Paula, and the the paddock and the room to move. So giving them what they naturally need, and then making sure that their gut is really healthy. So I'm trialing. Oh, you didn't scope? Yeah. So it probably definitely the natural path. Like I scoped. I can't get all my horses scoped in one go. They're following my videos. It was just, I know, the whole pasture thing. Well, see, pasture with wind sucking as well. I think that the pasture causes such so many interruptions in their gastric health. So I've got such a good opportunity to be able to observe. So this week, I've had my horses off on their supplements for 2 weeks, but it's only this week that I've removed them pretty much off all the pasture. They've got that little bit, they've eaten it so far down, and just complete Rhodes hay, and they're loosening their lupins and things like that. Poor Tommy, I really think, because 5 of them have big head, they would all have severe calcium deficiency, but poor Tommy looked like he was in pain. His eyes, there was something about him. I've had Tommy, I got him off the track. I rode him track work, God bless him, and he's 17 now, so I've had him for about 9 years. And he just had been, the last couple of years, he's been looking so just deteriorated, and then the big head. But pasture, oh my God, like, I think pasture is just terrible. And there's so much more to learn about it. But I'll film I'll film my progress of my horses, because it'll be really interesting to see. Yeah, I my horses wind sucking increased as well. I think it's the is it fructan? Fructan is a sugar in these type, like your ryegrass and your phalaris, that the sugars aren't very digestible, so they go into the hindgut and they ferment. So one of my windsuckers, Junior, I noticed, and I don't know if you'll hear it with your girl Paula, his stomach was always rumbling, like really loud, and he would be prone to a bit of colic. So the pasture has caused a major imbalance in his hindgut bacteria and just his overall gut health. So they've only been off the grass now. This is their 5th day on Rhodes hay. And I'm going to document their progress over the next 6 to 12 months. So it'll be really interesting to have this feedback and just see, go from such a nightmare situation. Okay, yes. Has she got that now, or only since she was on the pasture, Paula? Because that's what Junior had as well, very rumbling tummy, and he wasn't so much tucked up, but he was distressed and wind sucking. They're all chronic wind suckers. 2 of them scoped for ulcers. Junior, who's the one with the rumbling tummy, so he's scoped for severe pyloric ulcers. So he's got the ulcers on the protected, the glandular part of the stomach, which are harder to heal, and apparently for more chronic stress. So I know Junior, as a racehorse, had quite a long race career. He was he's a weaver as well. He is a lovely, quiet horse, but he needed to be given B1 shots before he raced, because he was that stressed going to racing. So you can imagine his whole experience of racing has been chronic stress, chronic pain. He weaved, he's weaver, but he doesn't weave very often now, but he weaved in racing, in his box, and also a chronic windsucker. So his stress levels were huge, were ongoing for an extended period of time, like years, and also, yeah. So you can see why he was doing it. But the rumbling tummy bit, now it's interesting, yesterday I'll tell you what I've got my horses on, but his stomach wasn't rumbling after his meal. And that was interesting because normally after eating, and I do feel like that his wind sucking has decreased a little bit, but we'll see. So I will tell you what I've got. So we'll just go back to the wind sucking for a moment. The good thing about getting them scoped, Paula, is you can go back, you can compare before or afterward. If she's on pasture for more than a couple of hours, she gets tucked up appearance. I know. Yes, the new shoots are terrible, and we'll go in with Jenny. Jenny goes into all of that with everything to do with the pasture and the new shoots, the real green grass that's full of, it's from the flooding. We had a massive floods here as well. That's when I got them off the pasture back in, and they're not going back out on it. But it's very high in nitrogen and potassium, apparently. Potassium and nitrates. I know it's very high in potassium, very low in sodium. So it puts their whole metabolic system out of whack, but it is quite complex. So I don't really understand what like equitation science to keep reading up on it and rereading it to get more of a sense of it. But yeah, your dry pastures are much better than any green grass, especially the fresh shoots. Capeweed's terrible. Yeah, so I've had capeweed in my paddocks. They haven't got any now, but they haven't eaten it, thankfully. But I would absolutely, my soil and pasture is very high in nitrates and phosphorus. So the wind sucking, I would say, would also, I think, is very much related to not only environmental, the way we keep them, but also gut health. And the good thing about having them scoped is I can, you know whether they have ulcers or not, and then you can go back and follow your natural. Yeah, you said she's picking on it this year. That's not good. So it's really good that you've got her off the pasture as much as possible. Absolutely, quality of hay is a problem, I know. So I've got someone over in the UK that she's having problems with her hay. Oh my God, her mare's off her head. I know, I thought having pasture would be the cure as well, Sarah Becker. It's not, it's a nightmare. I literally came out here and I saw all this green rolling grass, and I'm like, and long too. Like, it wasn't just real lush green, but long grass. And I thought, wow, this is just like heaven. Wow. Little did I know that was 2 years ago. Scoping doesn't detect hindgut ulcers, but it will detect pyloric ulcers. I would more than so Junior, for instance, has pyloric ulcers. So there's two types of ulcers. So you've got the squamous, if I'm pronouncing it right, ulcers, which is on the gastric ulceration, which is on the unprotected part of the stomach, which is the more common ulcers. And that's usually, they're usually caused from diet and having an empty stomach and things like that. So your hindgut ulcers, so your pyloric ulcers are down where it's more unusual, they're harder to treat, is on the glandular. Stomach's divided into two parts. You've got your squamous part, which is the unprotected lining of the stomach. You've got your glandular part, where it does supposed to have the mucus around it and protect the lining from ulceration. So what happens is pyloric ulcers are ulceration on the protected part of the stomach down near the opening of the small intestine. So it's saying that glandular ulcers are harder to get, but the fact that they're ulcerating in the glandular part is saying that there is the lining of the stomach is compromised, so the glandular part. So, and therefore the stomach can ulcer. So it would go with poor Junior, who had chronic stress throughout his racing career. And I would say that's caused a deterioration of his whole gut lining completely, including the glandular part. So the hindgut ulcers, they can't detect hindgut ulcers. I know, it's so hard with hay, Sarah Becker. When you go and buy it, there's none. That's terrible. I think you're in the dry part. You're very hot and in more of a drought, aren't you? So you don't have the green grass. Is it more of a brown type of dry grass than green grass? Because that's better. I know. I know. I was thinking the same thing. Acres of grasses. This is really wonderful, but little did we know it can be a nightmare. It does depend on the type of grass as well. I'm not up to date with the whole pasture and native grasses for horses. I don't own this place, so I only lease here, so I wouldn't be changing it. But I think if you owned your own place, you can definitely probably do something with it to make it more horse-friendly pasture. Yeah, green grass is not good of any grass for horses. Look, a bit of a pick is not going to be hugely detrimental, but don't expect it to be nourishing for them is what I would say. Whereas before I thought green grass was all nourishing. So the ulceration, yeah, hindgut ulcers, I think hindgut ulcer is more of a symptomatic thing. I definitely would think that if your horse has got a rumbling tummy, if they've got loose stools, then you're more likely to get a hindgut ulceration. So I would predict that a horse with pyloric ulcers is going to have hindgut ulceration, because, and I would also predict that racehorses are often going to have hindgut ulceration, because the hindgut ulceration is caused from the lining of the hindgut being compromised. Now, if you've got high grain diets and you've got bad bacteria in the hindgut, that's going to compromise the lining. So hindgut ulceration is a bit tricky, but I would think that a really natural, healthy diet, and getting the good bacteria back to a good level in their gut. And also too, now I'm trialing aloe vera. I'll tell you about that in a moment. But I think giving the horses something that will promote the structure of the lining of the stomach and the lining of the hindgut to renew and be healthy, and not feed, and also and preventing it from being compromised again from feeding grains and bad grasses and things like that. But I would think that horses, this is my personal opinion, a horse on pasture that's caused a lot of issues, particularly high fructans, like myself, I would say that the horse could have definitely acidic hindgut, and most probably hindgut ulcers. Yeah, so summer, and so it would be a lot drier there, Sarah Becker. Whereas here we've got this horrible green grass and lots of rain. So the hindgut ulcer, see, I think that would be a cause of wind sucking as well. So your wind sucking releases, I'll go back to the wind sucking releases. So even though we've taken away the problem, we're doing everything to make their life, heal their gut health, good social life, other equine companions, lots of hay and things like that. They more than likely don't seem to stop the wind sucking. I think it may be possible to decrease it. I have seen my horses decrease, so I can't. It's interesting too, going back to, because it's giving them a bit of a high, and to look into it more. So collars. Okay, let's just go collars. Collars, I don't agree with collars. It's been shown that collars, to restrict a habit, that it's a coping mechanism. So I suppose, to collar them and prevent them from doing something that they use to cope, has become an addiction, is only going to create more stress. It's been shown that collared horses, when you take the collar off, they exceed in their wind sucking. It actually gets worse. So I've briefly collared Nina when she was in at the racetrack. When she came to me, before she came out, she was a mate for one of my horses that I had in there recovering from surgery. It didn't stop her anyway, but I've never owned it. I borrowed that collar. I've never owned a wind sucking collar, and I don't use them. I suppose you would. You're welcome, Sarah Becker. I'm glad I'm helping and I can be of value. I'm always learning, so whatever I learn, I'll pass on to you. but with wind sucking collars, it's like, someone addicted to smoking. I've never smoked, but I would imagine that quitting overnight would be extremely stressful. And yeah, they're horrible things. I don't like them at all. It's really sad. A horse, and this is what made me feel very sad. A little young horse that's up the road. They're racing property, and this poor little thing is in a paddock. I think he's only a yearling. He's already wind sucking, and he's got a collar on. He's on pasture as well. So isn't that interesting? I don't even know whether this poor little fellow has been, whether he's whether he's still a weanling, but I know they're only young. I don't think he would have even been into the track, yet he's wind sucking. So that also goes, to me, it's saying something about the pasture and whether it's causing a lot of gastric problems, ulceration and imbalances in the hindgut. And then he's using the wind sucking is a coping mechanism, and it relieves the stress a little bit. It's also been, I suppose, any coping mechanism, and that's why humans pick up addictions to cope with stressful situations. So wind sucking is like that with horses. And then that getting off an addiction is not an easy thing. And so for someone to completely remove an addiction from you would be very stressful, and it's the same for horses. So I think just making their environment as good as possible and getting their health as good as possible is the best thing to do. It is, yeah. It is like fairy floss. Yeah, I don't like it at all. And it's interesting because I never thought of that in that way in the past. It's like oat and hay. Oat and hay is like fairy floss. So the wind sucking collars, I personally avoid and don't like them. It's interesting that the wind sucking is also, they think that maybe sucking in the air and the wind sucking increases salivation in the mouth, and that salivation, because saliva is alkaline, may contribute to soothing any gastric ulcers. So that could be part of the reason they do it as well. They may be getting momentarily relief, some gastric ulcer pain. And it was interesting, I saw, when did I write it? And it was interesting. So what they did, there's an article I found. So it said here, this is just a note. So I put, the act of wind sucking activates narcotic and dopamine receptors in the central nervous system. So thereby the wind sucking is rewarding the wind sucking behavior. So it's all to do with operant conditioning and like training your horse. You reward a behavior. So they wind suck and they're rewarded by it. So if the wind sucking caused discomfort, they wouldn't do it, but they're getting something positive from it. They're getting a feel-good feeling from it. So they said studies have demonstrated decreased severity of the behavior when treatment for human drug and alcohol addictions are given. So that's interesting. So when a horse is, I don't know what they gave them, probably antidepressants. When the medication was stopped, the behavior continued. So it's interesting that they reacted positively to treatment with wind sucking as a human does with treatment medications for compulsive behaviors. So it's all to do with it seems that it does change. It's obviously we know with human addictions it creates these feel-good hormones. I've had addictions myself, actually. I had very bad, so I actually know what it's like and how hard it is to stop. I had very bad eating disorders throughout a lot of my life, anorexia and bulimia. So that's an addiction, and that's horrendous, and it's very, very hard to get over. So it's interesting, the medications. So with medications, whether it's for anorexia or alcohol or drug addiction and things like that, it changes the it balances neurotransmitters. I think it increases serotonin. I don't know, actually. Yeah, but anyway, obviously it's to do with if they're giving a drug for human addictions, I would like to know. I've got a human addictions, and it works for horses. It's obviously to do with the neurotransmitters and the central nervous system. So all to do with hormones. So that's interesting. Stay tuned for more. I've got an article. I found a really good article, but I won't talk too much on it because I'll share some more. Let me see what it said. Compared these with similar human disorders associated with abnormally high activation of certain pathways used by the brain to send nerve signals out to the body. These pathways involve a neurotransmitter dopamine that activates certain nerve cells. Experiments in which humans and other animals are given large amounts of stimulants, drugs such as amphetamines and narcotics such as morphine, produce the same sorts of repeated stereotype behaviors. For example, a monkey repeatedly scratching and picking at itself, a cat moving incessantly looking from side to side and sniffing while humans engage in repetitive and compulsive acts of sorting objects. So excessive stimulation of the dopamine pathway in different species triggers activities that are in sense characteristics of the fundamental behaviors of each. Okay, this is getting a little bit, I have to make a little bit more sense of this. 7 crib biting horses were given injections of chemicals known to block the effect of narcotic. In all 7 cases, the frequency of crib biting dropped from several times a minute and from a high of 15 a minute to 0 within 20 minutes. In some cases, the effect of a single injection lasted for days. So isn't that interesting? When they were given a medication that blocked their high level of dopamine and narcotics, that the wind sucking went. So there we go. Stay tuned for more. I'll look more into that. I find that very interesting. I know. Wow, isn't it, Paula? I didn't know that. Just you see, I love questions, so keep asking questions, because when you put your question in last night, I've done research on wind sucking, but I actually only found that out last night when I thought I'll talk about wind sucking and I'll just look up a little bit more about it. So it's definitely an addiction. Now and I'm doing a bit of an experiment with my horses. So I've got them. So whether it's probably a combination of everything, it's definitely an addiction, but whether we can tone the addiction down when they don't need it as much to turn to, like my horses are in a herd situation, so they've got other horse company, but maybe also it'd be interesting to see whether herbs, like this is Victoria Ferguson. She's a herbal person. So I haven't read all of her article, but she does calming herbs, whether maybe some type of calming herbs would help horses with wind sucking. I'll look more into it. And we know wind sucking is not a learnt response. It's triggered mainly by inappropriate management, which causes the stress, which then causes the wind sucking to cope with the stress, which causes the release of endorphins, like ice addicts. People drug people on ice. That releases, what does that release? Dopamine. And then how hard is it for them to get it off? Have they helped a lot? What herbs do you do, Paula? So I've got my guys, and it'll be interesting. I might see, she does the Nervine herbs will reduce motor neuron response, promote restful sleep in humans, and those which raise the natural serotonin levels in the body have a role to play in treating these horses. So that's interesting. So yeah, chamomile. Okay. So that's interesting. Raising the natural serotonin levels in the body helps. So serotonin, low serotonin must then crave the body to want more dopamine and narcotics. There's a little bit more that goes into that. And it's interesting, I know with humans, now this is interesting as well. So I'd say maybe these horses that are wind sucking are in deficit in their serotonin levels. Serotonin levels, I know with humans, most of your serotonin comes from gut health. Is that the same with horses? I'd say so. If their gut health is completely compromised, their serotonin levels are going to be low. And therefore, they are drawn naturally to increase their dopamine levels, I suppose, like drug addicts. Drug addicts' serotonin levels are low, so the drugs increase the dopamine levels. That's interesting. I'm going to look more into that. And maybe that's why they gave the horses that they were treating drug addicts, human addictions with, would have increased serotonin levels in the horses. I know, an aha moment. Interesting, isn't it? I'm getting a little bit in a brain overload, but I just thought of that, just putting this together. So something that increases serotonin levels in a horse may decrease wind sucking, plus gut health as well. So, serotonin is to do with gut health. Let me put this little note. Serotonin. I have just got so much that I could talk about. I'm going to look more into that. So going on to that, I'll tell you what I've got my horses on. And I think that I've noticed a little bit of improvement in Junior. So I'm using aloe vera is apparently a very good. So they did try. No worries, Paula. I've got to get going as well because I've got all these hungry horses to feed myself. But I'll tell you about what I'm using for gut health. I'm using aloe vera and Conky's Own GastroCoat and bentonite clay. So maybe we can talk more about that in next week's Q&A. Let me know. I'll tell you and we might let's talk more about some herbs and things like that. Let's look into that. But I better go as well because I've been talking for an hour and a half. So keep an eye on your email because I'm sending out emails when it comes to the live training. I'll put it up in the group as well, but we'll get together in the community and we'll work out. First of all, I want to make sure everyone's done the Kickstart Roadmap course. And then I will want to make sure that you do the first 2 lessons with the Tyree training series on how horses learn. And then what we'll do after that, we'll go into live training of day 1 of teaching stop and go in hand. And I've got the videos for that. And we'll work through. It's going to be long training. That's what I'm thinking, though. It's going to be quite long. So maybe we can even look at a 12-week program or something that we can do live. I'll sit down and work out how long it will be, but we'll have everything recorded so we can keep going back on it. But just a little bit of brainstorming for me, and I'll get you guys together as well in the community, and we'll work out what will work for you. We'll try and get 10 or so of us together and do a live training with that. I'll let you go, Paula. I better go. Sarah Becker, thank you so much for joining. And keep an eye on your email. I'll let you know when I send them out, but we'll follow up this conversation in next week's Q&A. Okay, bye.